right, okay. 3 things you need to know to get started with EFT tapping. You ready? Number 1, be specific. What do I mean by specific? Tapping works the best if you are tapping on a specific incident or a specific fear, a specific thing. How do you know it's specific enough? Generally, we say, let's say you're tapping on a memory or something that had happened or something that's bothering you, something that actually, when it happened, was about 1 to 3 minutes long. So we're not talking about a huge thing. We're talking about a specific short thing. And generally, you can sum it up in the phrase of this thing that happened when blank and I felt blank. So that time I got on stage and bombed my lines, and I felt or I feel really ashamed. Or that time my boyfriend told me I was fat, and now and I feel furious and ashamed, right? So it's the time when blank happened, and I felt or I'm feeling, when I still think about it, blank. So something specific. Do you see how your entire relationship with your mother does not fall into this category, right? But you could use that time that my mom said that she was really disappointed in me, and I felt blank. You see it? So number 1 is we're being specific. But by the way, just so you know, often you do enough little specific pieces of something, like your relationship with your mom or that crappy breakup that you had. You do enough specific pieces, and it's like the trauma or the stress around the whole thing kind of dissipates, right? So it's not like we have to go walk around tapping on every little piece of stress in our lives. However, especially at the beginning, stick with something small and specific. How else do you know you're being specific? Here's another good reason, a good way to know. If you can even give it a title. Imagine it as a movie and give it a title, like The Time That My Boyfriend Called Me Fat, right? Like a short movie. It's specific, right? And again, you want something that in life happened for about 3 minutes, which is actually really generally a lot of the most stressful stuff can be kind of, if you really think about it, the worst of it happened in this emotional crescendo in the middle of an argument, in the middle of an interaction, in the middle of something, right? And it was a short little snippet. So that's what we're going to start with. Short snippets that in your actual life were between 1 to 3 minutes long, specific and stressful. A stressful event, a stressful memory, a stressful conversation, something like that. Okay, so number 1, be specific. Number 2, this is an easy one, be hydrated. It works much better if you're hydrated. If you need to pause now, go get a glass of water, go do it. Okay, and number 3, before we get started, we always do a SUDS indicator. A SUD stands for subjective unit of distress. What does that mean? Complicated name. It just means before we get started with tapping, we always prompt ourselves to be like, okay, let's say I'm going to tap on this argument I just had with my boyfriend, right? I'm really, really upset about it. Well, how upset? Give yourself a number on a scale from 1 to 10. If 10 is like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever, I feel terrible, and 0 is like, no big deal. And what that does for you is just give you an actual kind of concrete value, so that after you do the tapping, and sometimes you feel kind of hazy, you're like, I don't know how I feel anymore, right? Well, stop and think, and then you'll compare your level of distress now. Maybe before you were 10, now you're 2, right? So that's why we're gonna do our subjective unit of distress, or SUDS value. And I'll prompt you at the beginning of every video, right? Stop, and on a scale from 1 to 10, is it a 0? Is it a 5? Is it a 10? If 10 is the worst, 0 is nothing. And you'll see at the end of the tapping how it's shifted. All right, so 3 tips again. Number 1, be specific. Number 2, be hydrated. And number 3, give yourself an indicator from 0 to 10 of how distressed you are at the beginning before you get started, so you can see the shift at the end.